busy day, and week number 1 of the North Dakota legislative session is in the books. Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Hennon. We're coming to you live and direct from the Peacock Alley, American Grill and Bar in historic downtown Bismarck, and kicking off another edition of the Legislature Today. Glad to have everybody along. Dale Wetzel, the managing editor of Great Plains News, after a busy day, is here to give us a little recap what happened in the legislature today, and then we have some very special guests joining us in just a moment. Dale, what happened?
Well, the big news, so to speak, was the speech by the chairman of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. His name is Richard McLeod, and it was quite, I thought, extraordinary as these things go. He brought a number of young people with him from the reservation, and essentially said, you know, these are our future. These people are our future. These young people are our future. And if you don't like your prospects for the future, we can change them now. It was quite a nice opening. He has an interesting background. He's a retired postal worker. He's a business owner on the reservation, and he seems to have a pretty good understanding of what legislators want to hear, because he did ask for support. He asked for job training support from the state. He asked for support for purchasing land to enlarge the reservation, but he also said that tribal governments, including his own, need to be more transparent and more open about their own operations, how they spend money. And I'm sure that was appealing to folks that are going to be deciding, for one thing, whether or not to give another tribe, the 3 affiliated tribes, a larger share of oil tax revenue that's produced on tribal land. And I think that that's going to be one of the key things that is going to be asked in return for any changes along those lines, is that where is your transparency? Open your books up and let's see where this money has been going.
Thursday evenings, we're going to do something very unique that is actually the brainchild of Andy Peterson, who heads the newly rebranded GNDC, and he is among our guests tonight. He'll be here every Thursday along with other guests. He's invited some folks today, so we'll turn it over to Dale to chit-chat with Andy a little bit about the plan for Thursday nights, and then introduce our guests.
Well, we're going to talk about issues before the legislature. I think that's the best way of putting it. We have Mr. Andy Peterson, who is the president of the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce. We have Bill Shalhoub, a businessman in Bismarck, a lobbyist for GNDC, and a general man about town. And we have Mr. Max Schneider, Senator Max Schneider, the Senate Democratic leader in the North Dakota Senate, and also frankly, a world-renowned former college football player who's been kind of suffering recently because the Bison apparently have been dominating the airwaves and not the rightful UND Sioux, or UND whatever they are.
Sioux's fine with me, Dan.
UND.
So, Andy, what do you think? What do you think about the first week of the session?
You know, first week of the session, in my mind, is pretty much the first week of the session. People are finding their chairs, figuring out where the cafeteria is. And a lot of bills are either being held or agency bills are being heard. So pretty typical first week of the session. A couple of surprises in there from time to time, but overall, I think people are just kind of figuring out where they want to be and what side they want to be on.
Mac, why don't you tell our listeners what an agency bill is?
An agency bill is basically what it is. It's a bill that is filed by an administrative agency, say North Dakota Department of Human Services. They may want a technical change to the law, and so they're the experts, they're the bureaucrats who have to live with these statutes that we pass once every 2 years. And they get to pre-file a bill. They were due, I believe, December 6th. And so they're in the hopper right away, and the committees get to hear those first before they hear bills that are introduced by legislators.
Yeah, pre-filed bills, as we refer to them, they are introduced early. That way the legislative committees have some grease for the wheels once the committee hearings begin. What's your impressions of the first week, Bill?
Well, it's the same as Andy's. I think the first week is the first week. It was interesting, I think, to see the governor's the budget reduced in the agency bills. There's also a bill put through appropriations for all of the agency budgets for all the departments of government. And while you get some flavor of that in the governor's first speech or to the pre-session, and then maybe in his State of the State, when you actually get to see the numbers as they flow through the agency bills and the specific programs the governor is promoting and endorsing, which are all in the various bills in commerce or in human services or whatever department it is, where you really get to see how much money we're talking about for whatever program, and you get some idea of where you're headed down the line in the very important subject of where our money is going to be spent.
Mac, what impressed you about the first week? Anything? I mean, anything extraordinary?
I always enjoy the first week. It's certainly an honor to hear from Chairman McLeod today, to hear from the governor earlier this week, and I thought the Chief Justice's address was also well received, very direct, very to the point, not much flash. And so, the pomp and circumstance of it all, it's fun, but now it's really time to get down to work. We've got bills on the floor already tomorrow that are going to be heard by the full Senate, and the action really starts tomorrow and next week.
Yeah, we have I think it's 23 or 4 new legislators, and they're probably thinking, boy, this stuff is easy. But, they'll start getting a real taste of it, I think, next week.
They will. One thing that struck me, Dale, about the governor's speech, he had a certain spring in his step, if I could use that term, being newly elected on his own rather than coming in and being filling in behind Mr. Hoeven. So you could just tell that in his speech. I mean, it was a different Jack than we've seen before. I think he's grown into the job. He's grown into it very nicely. And it really showed in that speech at the legislature this week.
I thought he was he's a very reserved man, and he did come across a little zippier during his speech.
He's very thoughtful.
Yeah. I mean, when I say reserved, I don't mean it to be critical. He's very cautious. He's very reserved. He's very kind of
takes it in.
Inscrutable in some ways. I mean, it's very interesting it was very interesting when he was in the legislature and the chairman of the Appropriations Committee to watch him up in front, watch him react to what people said and what people did, and he's just kind of looking and going, okay. And he's a very, I wouldn't want to play poker with the man. I mean, he keeps his options open. He keeps his innermost thoughts to himself, and and plus he's frankly extremely smart man.
He is. But we saw a different Jack at that speech.
I thought so. I think maybe less than I think it was maybe a little less different than you might think, but it was different. Yes, a little zippier.
I thought it was well delivered too. Where he singled out the soldiers and their families and thanked them for their service. I don't think there was anybody in there who didn't have a tough time keeping it together, and so I thought that was very well done.
Yes.
Well, he pointed out other folks in the speech as well. Deb Anderson from Summers Manufacturing, who's winning the Manufacturing Woman of the Year in Washington, D.C. She was there with her family, and that was a proud moment to see that a woman from North Dakota running a manufacturing company was pointed out. So,
who started the tradition in North Dakota? I know it's been done at State of the Unions in Washington for a lot of years, but maybe Bill and Dale would probably best remember. When did they start pointing on people in the balcony? Kind of.
Ed Schaefer did it.
I think Ed started it.
I don't know if he started it.
92, 96. I know that Governor Hoeven used that ploy or used that thing for very effectively during his terms as he was trying to highlight whatever big program he was rolling out. His first session, I think his big rollout was the extra teacher pay.
Yes.
We were going to do that, and then the Department of Commerce, those kind of things. And he used those people to bring forward or to highlight that and to try to show up front why I think it was that time it was about $60 million that we're asking for extra pay for teachers. That would have been 2000. Why that was so important and why we had to pass that at that time, at a time when we really didn't necessarily have that much money. It's just hard to believe in 12 years the game has changed that much that now we've almost $60 million while we can handle that with no problem.
Yeah.
It's a nice touch, though. I think it's nice to hear from people all around the state and sprinkle around.
I'm racking my brain trying to think if Governor Sinner did it. I don't think so. At least he didn't. I know he didn't do it to the extent that Ed Schaefer and going forward. I mean, Ed Schaefer, frankly, made a huge deal of the state of the state. I mean, he was giving them every year, which I thought was a little much, frankly. And one time he did a telemedicine demonstration in front of everyone when he did his State of the State address, and the doctor poked something in his ear and was giving him an ear exam. And I asked him about it later, and Ed Schaefer, who was, famously self-deprecating, said he was just worried that the light was going to be shining all the way through. I wanted to ask a question of all three of you gentlemen. Do you think that there's a dearth of big ideas in in the legislature, especially given the fact that
Yes.
we have so much money?
You know, we have had one. We haven't talked much about it, but that is reducing income, business tax, and property tax all by a third. Now, we went through the Measure 2 fight. We were all involved in that, and we knew that that was a plan without a plan on some fronts. But I think that message was forwarded to the legislature that we need to do something about property taxes in our state. And so I think that's a big idea. I don't think we're totally without a dearth in that department.
I think some big ideas, and there are lots of big ideas out there that can just be flat out stolen. You
Sure.
look at what Wyoming did, pretty similar state, conservative bent, lots of natural resources, not many people. Even little old Wyoming took $400 million, set it aside as an endowment to permanently fund merit-based scholarships. Those are the kind of big ideas that we need.
That's true.
And that was something, Andy, that you and I worked on as part of North Dakota 2020.
Yes.
One of the recommendations that came out was a scholarship endowment.
Right.
And the beauty of it is, if you set it aside once and don't dip into the principal, that return on investment is always going to be there, even after the last drop of oil is extracted from the ground. So those are the kind of big ideas I'd like to see us talk about more.
Sure.
Mac, we're going to have that chance when we talk about the Legacy Fund. I think that if I remember the numbers correctly, we're going to start out with $1 billion at the end of this biennium in that fund.
More than that, I think, yeah.
It's going to exceed $1 billion, and that's from a projection at the end of the last biennium of about $750 million. So, and we can't touch it for 6 years. It's going to grow, but I think there's going to be a bill in that's going to talk about starting to study when the interest starts to be paid out of that, and if the interest is if the principal is $4 or $5 billion, that's a lot of money that can be used for the kind of things that we're talking about, assuming you don't need it to maintain other programming at that stage, that there's a good cash flow. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that the interim and the current legislature can talk about, as how do we use that to further our growth into into this century or even into the next century, and those are the kind of things I think we're all talking about, where we're not talking about North Dakota the next biennium, but we can be talking about North Dakota the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and how do we make sure that we can continue this prosperity for that long, even if there is some kind of blip on the horizon.
Let's introduce our first guest from the Public Service Commission, Dale.
It's Julie Fedorchik. When I met Julie, this was, it was 92, I believe, or maybe a little later than that. Julie Fedorchik was born Julie Liffrig. Her father was a highway commissioner, the highway commissioner in the administration of Republican Governor Al Olson in the early 80s. When I met Julie, when I worked for the Associated Press, Julie came on board as the press secretary for Governor Ed Schaefer in the mid-90s. And she worked for Ed Schaefer, she worked for Governor John Hoeven, and she worked for Senator John Hoeven when he was elected to the Senate. In fact, her last job before she became a public service commissioner was as the state director for Senator Hoeven, based in Bismarck. And she's an up-and-comer, I guess I would describe it, and she's got a long background in public policy and politics, and it'll be very interesting to see how well she adapts to her new job. So how well are you adapting to your new job, Julie?
Well, it's been a whole 6 days, I believe, since I started, and it's been a very interesting week. I'm really enjoying it. It's probably more fun than I expected. The staff is phenomenal. The other commissioners are great to work with, and I came in expecting that my policy experience and my years in state government and even a couple years with the federal government would have been my greatest asset coming in, and I'm kind of finding that my position as a consumer and a North Dakota citizen and a mom and a family member in North Dakota is probably as valuable as my years of poly experience. I'm glad I have that experience in state government, but I think it's I'm seeing myself viewing the issues through the eyes of a citizen, and I think that's a great, a valuable resource.
Could you try to quantify that what you mean when you say I'm viewing it through the eyes of a citizen?
Well, one of the things that the Public Service Commission's greatest role, and this is why I think I'm really going to enjoy serving on this in this agency, is they protect or are looking out for the consumer in a variety of areas that we regulate. One of them is electric and gas utilities. Another one is in pipeline sightings, and another is in grain warehousing and storage. And another big one is in licensing and in weights and measures. And so we're out there trying to make sure that these various businesses are operating fairly, that there's a fair competitive environment for them to operate in, and that they are treating consumers fairly. You can't go shop around for a different electrical company to buy your electrical service. So you have to trust that the one that is providing your electrical service is doing so in a fair way. They aren't gouging you in terms of price, and that they're taking care of the environment and doing all these important things, and that they have a reliable service. So that's the role of the Public Service Commission.
So in other words, when you buy a gallon of gasoline, the Public Service Commission makes sure that it is indeed a gallon.
Exactly. The weights and measures area is one of the most interesting, I think, and it's one that I mention to people when they ask, what do you do? And so I try to find a practical example. And the weights and measures is one of those things that was started, at the early stages of our country. I think that Thomas Jefferson, or one of our early leaders, decided we need to make sure that that people can count on that they're buying a pound of apples, that it's a pound of apples. Otherwise, not only does the consumer get ripped off, but the other competitors get ripped off too. And so you have to have that fair playing field to support a good environment for business, and that's the Public Service Commission's role.
Early on, you said that this was more fun than you anticipated. Can you tell me what you meant by that?
Well, when you tell people that you're going to serve on the Public Service Commission, or that this is a job that you want, they look at you kind of funny. Like, really? Even one of the people.
And maybe you enjoyed trips to the dentist too.
Yes, exactly. So you want to learn about electric regulatory policy. And so, it seems like it's going to be rather dry and technical, but when you're looking at it from the eyes of how does this affect people? How does this affect people who are buying power or gas, or how does it affect landowners when they're having a pipeline for gas or oil sited through their area? How do these various issues affect people? It makes it very interesting and fun.
Can you tell us how you came to be on the Public Service Commission? How did this evolve?
Sure. About a year ago, when Tony Clark decided that he was going to pursue the FERC role on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and it became apparent that he wasn't going to run again, and his position became open. I was somewhat interested in that, and then Randy decided that he was going to go for that, and I thought, well, he's got really good credentials for that spot, so I wasn't going to take on Randy. And so
that's a good thing for Randy, I'm sure.
Well, a good thing for me too, I think. And so he went for it and pursued that, and then I was appointed to be the state director for Senator Hoeven, which was another good opportunity for me, so that was great. And then when Kevin looked like he was in a strong position to win, then I started talking to folks and saying I might be interested, and then one thing led to another, and I got the appointment.
What do you think about being an elected official? I mean, you haven't been elected yet, but I presume that at some point you will want to be on the ballot. What do you think about that?
It's a mind switch for me. I mean, I have to change my mindset because I've always served, elected officials, and it's different being one yourself. It's easy to tell people what you think they should do or what positions they should take, and when you're thinking about yourself being the ultimate decision maker, it's different. But I think I've been well prepared for that, and I think the whole process of how you think through issues is the same, and it's just that I have the final say, and I don't just have to try to advocate or convince somebody else to agree with what I think they should do, so I enjoy it.
Mr. Randy Chrisman, former Senator Randy Chrisman, he is from Hazen. He's a rancher. He was part of a historic election, actually. Was it 1994, Randy? When Randy Chrisman and Randy Schobinger were two of the Republican senators that gave the Republicans in the Senate the majority. And Randy represented District 33 in the Senate. It's coal country, ranching country. Randy eventually became the assistant majority leader in the North Dakota Senate, and last year he decided to run for the Public Service Commission. He thought he had some background there because of his representation of North Dakota's coal country with its coal mines, its power plants, its power lines. All of these things are things that the Public Service Commission deals with as a regulatory agency. And we have him here this evening. So welcome, Randy.
Well, thanks, Dale, and thanks, Scott, for having me on in the first week of the new venture. It's, I think, an exciting one. I'm proud to be a part of it.
What are your impressions now of being a Public Service Commissioner?
Well, all day long I am up there kind of feeling a little bit homesick for the Senate. For 18 years I have really enjoyed the legislative process. But as I said a few times during the course of the last year, I do think that the good things that we have going in North Dakota are most threatened by the regulatory world, not the policy-making world right now. So I'm glad to have moved over and become a part of the regulatory world and try and make sure that here within North Dakota, our Public Service Commission job does a good job of regulating and doesn't stifle growth and development, but just does it the way it ought to be done.
What have you learned so far?
Well, I've learned that I have a lot to learn. For one thing, I've learned that we have a tremendous staff, and that has been so wonderful because, I don't care what kind of new job you come into, there's a lot of details to learn. You have plans for doing certain things different than what it's been done in the past, but you come in and you find out that maybe there were some reasons that you didn't know why it's been done the way it was done before. And so the staff has been delightful in both encouraging new ideas but explaining the rationale for the old ways. I'm very pleased to work with Julie, who you had on earlier. She is going to be a tremendous commissioner. And then the other thing, and it's not a learning thing, I'm not surprised at all, but our fellow commissioner, Brian Kalk, has been there for 4 years now, and he is really providing good leadership to help us get started and make sure that we're able to do the best job that we can.
Mr. Roscoe Striley, who is, I believe, serving his second section, in his second section, and he just joined the House Appropriations Committee, which is a rarity, frankly, for someone in their second session. So congratulations for that. The House Appropriations Committee is in charge of spending money. And Mr. Striley, I just wanted to ask you, what's your approach to spending the public's money?
Well, I'm, like we've talked in the past, and thanks for having me on, but I'm very conservative, so I'm going to obviously watch the budgets and look into them in great detail. It's a lot of spending, a lot of it we need in the infrastructure out west, in the flood projects, water projects. I'd like to see a little bit more tax relief in that, but I'm conservative in nature, and that's how I'm going to approach appropriations.
We have another member of the Republican leadership joining us on the program tonight. Mike Nathy is next up, and Mike is a member of was chairing the Education Committee and is as well the chairman of the Republican House Caucus and represents Bismarck's District 30. How are you, Mike? Good to see you.
Thank you, Scott.
Good to see you. Dale, go ahead and take away on the questioning for Representative Nathy.
Mr. Nathy, tell us a little bit about yourself first. Where are you from? What do you do?
I am originally from Minnesota. I was born in Montevideo, Minnesota, in the southwestern part of the state.
I understand that endears you to Scott Henry.
Yes, it does. Scott and I grew up in the same town. Scott graduated a year after I did. Graduated with my brother Mark. And
so you knew this guy in high school?
I knew Scott from when we were both about 3 feet high.
Oh, my goodness.
He's old, though. He's an 82 grad. I'm an 83.
Okay.
The Mohawks.
Go Mohawks.
Scott's father had owned the radio station out there. But graduated from there. Went to the University of Minnesota to play baseball. I was recruited to play baseball there. And
what position did you play?
I was a pitcher. And
what were your strengths?
Control. I was a left-handed pitcher, so being left-handed in baseball gives you a little bit of an edge. And just before my junior year,
I'm surprised you're still not playing.
Well, just before my junior year, I was in a pretty nasty car accident and lost part of my left collarbone, so my baseball career came to a screeching halt. But my roommate played 8 years in the majors.
Who was he?
Brian Hickerson from Bemidji, Minnesota.
I'll be darned.
So, so I had a lot of fun and enjoyed that great experience. We used to practice with the Twins in the wintertime and used to play basketball with Kirby Puckett before anybody knew who Kirby Puckett was. So,
how was he?
Terrible basketball player.
Really?
Yeah, he was terrible. But the minute he hit big time, we didn't see much of him after that. But anyways, I'm a funeral director by trade. I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a mortuary science degree. Worked 10 years down there. My wife, I met in Minneapolis. She's from Bismarck originally. And once I married into the family, my in-laws are big hunters. And so they dragged me out to the Badlands for many years to go deer hunting. And I fell in love with western North Dakota.
Had you been hunting before then?
I'd never deer hunted. I had hunted upland game in Minnesota, but never deer hunting. And so really loved it, and had an itch after my oldest child was born to get out of Minneapolis. I lived there, gone to school there, lived there, and wanted to open up a funeral home up here. So I came up here about a half dozen times on my own and talked to business people and bankers and this and that. And 2 gentlemen I worked for in Minneapolis decided to help me out and got going. So when I moved here in '95, I knew 2 people, my 2 brother-in-laws. That was the only people I knew, and just kind of started from there. So.
I wanted to ask you something about, I was looking through the bills that have been filed so far, and I was looking at some of the ones you sponsored, and there's one that I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, there's such a variety and diversity of bills that are introduced in the legislature, and this one has to do with towing someone on water skis.
Yes.
And it says an individual doesn't have to wear a life preserver if they are 16 years of age or older and engaged in windsurfing or board sailing. And what was your reason for putting that in?
He does come from the land of 10,000 lakes, right?
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at it, Dale, that's in Section 1. In a different
Yes.
section, that is just lawyers putting it in one section for another so it fits.
Okay.
But the gist of the bill is if I'm towing Scott on the tube, I have to have somebody else sitting next to me in the boat to watch.
Looking at
What my constituent wants is to have a mirror like we do in Minnesota and Florida, so I can drive and just look in the mirror and not have to have somebody else in the boat.
Okay.
I asked the same question when I saw that. That's just legislative counsel moving words around.
Okay. So the point of the bill is you can drive with a mirror instead of having someone seated next to you.
Without having somebody watch. Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay,
very
but
simple.
Essentially, you're watching yourself as the boat driver instead
Yeah,
of
and there's studies that show that having a mirror is actually safer and I find myself doing this, even though I have somebody watching, I still look over my left shoulder. You're better off to look in the mirror, and just like driving a car.
I by the way, didn't know that was illegal and haven't been doing it via rear view mirror.
I don't know if the statute of limitations has expired on this one.
I found out pulling my son, and I had 2 mirrors on my jet ski and game and fish.
And you have another bill that I guess I would refer to it as a taxpayer notice bill when your property taxes are being considered. Could you describe that for us?
This one is really to hold more transparency to the local subdivisions, to the counties and the school boards. And what this does is when you get your property tax statement in December, in this same envelope will be, for lack of a better word, an explanation letter. And it'll say, Mr. Wetzel, your property taxes went up as a result of the following issues. We'll list the issue and show the votes of those commissioners or those school board members. Mm-hmm. So it will show all the issues that contribute to the increase of your property tax.
Do you think that this information is not presented now?
I think it's out there, but I don't think people have to go hunting for this. I think just adds more transparency and gives people more information, because in December when they get that property tax, that's when you have their attention.
We do have one question from a listener wanting to know from your district, by the way, that if you
and can you please tell us where your district is?
My district is South Bismarck, that's over Southport, over by the Missouri River towards University of Mary, and then up towards Divide Avenue over by Sleepy Hollow, up in that general area.
They said the next time in your ballot, the answer to this question will determine whether or not you get their vote.
Okay.
Are you ready for this? Do you really believe left-handed pitchers have an advantage in baseball?
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
Maybe you want to expand on that just a little bit, just to try and win this guy over.
But you need your whole collarbone.
Yeah, you need your whole collar. Well, anybody can be right-handed. You got to be a little special to be left-handed.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
This is Representative Mike Nathy of Bismarck, a Republican, the chairman of the House Education Committee, and the chairman of the House Republican Caucus.
Another Legislature Today is in the books. We're back Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon, live on 550 K-Fire, AM 1100 The Flag, and AM 1090 in the Bakken, folks. Thank you for listening to the Legislature Today radio show. And don't forget, we're back 2 hours every night, Monday through Thursday, all session long. You want to know what's happening on the legislature scene in North Dakota? You're listening right here to the Legislature Today. Have a great night, and thanks for listening.